Hi, and welcome to the Coffin Lounge. I am your host, VampireKitten, and it is Pride Month. Officially today, let's welcome James to the show. James is with Kansas City Freaks and Geeks. Let's talk a little bit about you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Vampire Kitten, right there. It's great to be on the coffee lounge, the Coffin Lounge, not the coffee lounge. Might need to get a little bit more coffee right there. But the Coffin Lounge, and it's great to be here today. And it is the start of Pride Month right there.
Woo!
So
Celebrate.
happy to be on June 1st. I don't know when we'll get this aired, but happy to be here today. Um, yeah, a little bit about me. I'm back in Kansas City. I went and did my 20 years in the military, traveling kind of all over God's green earth, around different parts of America, and some overseas assignments, doing some really fun stuff. Came back and retired in Kansas City, and then started working back for the Department of Defense as a contractor. And in that process of it, really got to explore more passions that I hadn't been able to explore in my move. And one of those is really being from this area, really trying to really bring out the weirdness of Kansas City and let people have the ability to be weird in Kansas City, without any type of fear of not finding a group to fit into or any of the internal fighting that can sometimes happen. So really just wanted to make a good space for as many people as possible. And in that sense, I partnered with some friends to make a community. We started out on Facebook. We've got an Instagram, and we've done some events, and we support a lot of events in town. And that's our community called Kansas City Freaks and Geeks. Which, if you're a local artist, if you're a local creator, if you're doing any of events on that, we will happily try to promote your events. Um, and we sometimes promote people's events that we just think are people that are doing great, cool stuff in town. So that's the community we've built and are still building today. We've just got over, about 1,200 followers right now, and we're doing some really fun things coming up here in the next couple months.
That is really exciting. So you're a Kansas City native.
Kansas City native, yeah.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure if you had just like left and then come back and fell in love with the city or.
Yeah, I was born right on state line, right over in Kansas City, Missouri. My dad, my mom traveled all around for his job, and I graduated high school in the local area. Went to Kansas University and down in Lawrence for a bit before joining the military. And my last assignment was up in St. Joseph, Missouri. So I always considered Kansas City home. I've always been really proud of the little weirdness of this city. The city is incredibly weird, and we are a lot more than just the Chiefs. I don't have a problem with football, but the history of this city fascinates me. The culture of this city fascinates me. Um, and as we try to, you know, be a city or a metropolitan area across two states that are constantly changing. Their kind of perspectives as states and what they mean. We've created this little city that, while both the states may hate each other, as you see from the animosity charts of states, Kansas City, Missouri metropolitan area, the whole of it, really is a pretty fascinating little place that we've created.
So I'm originally from SoCal. So moving to Kansas City has been a very interesting experience. I actually love it here. I have fallen completely in love with the city, and the people here are amazing. Midwesterners are just so great. I mean, very specifically here, though, of all other places that I've been in the Midwest, and I'm just happy to be here myself, and I think it's really cool what you're doing because a lot of big cities, Los Angeles, New York, whatever, they have their, goth, freaks and geeks, gamer groups, whatever. And I think that the amount of effort that you and your group and other groups have done to get people to come together and actually like do some really cool things is awesome.
And that was kind of all spurred by a couple things, like Keep Austin Weird, right? Was a
Mm-hmm.
thing that I grew up, or not grew up, but I was, grew up in Lawrence, or you know, had a lot of my defining moments in Lawrence where it was really trying to be weird, and I saw Lawrence become a lot less weird. And then that whole Keep Austin Weird, and Austin is not as weird as it was back in the time, but it still has maintains pockets of weirdness. And parts of Kansas City have tried to not be weird at all.
Right.
I know of some court cases going on right now in the Overland Park area where anybody who's kind of different, they're kind of coming out. And then you've got like, Mayor Lucas, who's really trying to really fight for making Kansas City, Missouri, a more safer space for, as we're talking Pride Month, for
Mm-hmm.
uh, particularly Missouri trans individuals. So we've got to kind of fight in that. And then you just had coronavirus, and everybody got pushed into their homes, and everybody got really lonely. And Kansas City lost so many great venues during that time. And some of them became a lot less weird. So I think that everyone in all communities really needs to stand up and really try to express their weirdness and really try to create places for weird people to gather with the least amount of infighting possible, and just kind of be unified as being, we're a little bit non-normative, and that's okay.
Right. Exactly. I think that's fantastic. You guys are doing amazing stuff. Um, so I think it's interesting because I was here at the tail end of coronavirus and I got to experience a couple of unique venues that shut down shortly after when I got here. So I feel lucky that I got to experience a couple of things. Oh gosh, I don't even remember the venue's name. There were a couple, and then shortly I went to one show there, and then they were like done after
Mm-hmm.
that and shut down. And it's kind of unfortunate because it feels like there's not a lot of spaces like that anymore. But people like you and people like the little local small businesses really tried to turn it around with like little events that are themed or pop-up like vendor spaces for like really unique stuff, oddities and things like that. And I think that's so important because Kansas City seems to be losing a lot of that.
Yeah, Noir shut. There was a business, Noir, that shut down.
I heard about
Um,
that.
yeah, and that was a great little space. There was another shop, Monkey Wrench, that was a great little store, and the proprietor passed away.
Oh no.
And I have one of the things that was display cabinets there from Monkey Wrench, because it was such a major part of Kansas City history. And there are great places still. The Darkwood Gallery is a place on Independence that I highly recommend everyone go and check out. Black Rose Company, and then they have other
Mm.
little different things like Kansas City Goth Copy and the Swap and Shops right there. There are things out there, and there's also people out there working. Like, it's one of the things we've tried to do within Kansas City Freaks and Geeks is really try to highlight a freak of the week. We can't keep up on a weekly basis because of, it is time commitment, as VampireKitten, to make podcasts and to do the interviews and to
Right.
do that. But no, there's so many people pushing, trying to make things a little bit better every day. And we've just lost, and this is, I think, always important to understand in that community, that we've lost two people that really worked hard for this community. Ron Stanley recently passed away. He was really big into both the goth scene and, additionally to that, the fetish scene. And he was one of the best people I knew in those scenes. And then another one, Richard Burns, passed away, and he was one of the best promoters of LARPing, live action role playing, particularly vampire live action role playing, in the city for years. And I think it's always important that we have to keep refreshing that wheel. We have to keep bringing in people and promoting people. So we've promoted a lot of things. Uh, we promoted our Route 66 Mr. Leather winner, Mark Athens. We've promoted um, Katerina and the work that she's done with Temple Scarlet. We promoted individualized creators of creating art. And we've really tried to let all creators have a place to promote themselves.
Right.
Um,
And a side note there, I actually was lucky enough to get to know Ron a little bit before he had passed, and he actually tied me for the first time. Shibari. I had never done it before, and I went to like a dark side event, and he was there, and he's like, "You want to do it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let me try it." And that was when we became friends, and it's just like such a Ron was such a blow to the community, and it just happened so suddenly. And I hope that his family's okay, but he meant a lot to a lot of people, you know.
yeah.
And segueing a little bit from that, I think it's interesting for people to understand that Kansas City does have kind of a unique group of artists. Like when I first moved here, I do aerial, like
Mhm.
acrobatics, and Kansas City actually has a ginormous aerial community. Like as big, like probably not as big as Vegas, but it's a lot of schools and a lot of people who are interested in it. And I think that is something that's sort of not seen. Everybody thinks it's just this flyover city, but
Mhm.
when you really get down to the root of it, it's really just a big city, just a little bit more spread out, like Vegas or Los Angeles or whatever.
You know, the there's some really crazy things. If I were to think about the city, nestled on all these rivers coming together, it does create little different pockets, and some of those pockets are probably more appealing to different cultures than others. But at the same time, like our the weird traditions that we've had from the selection of this city that really made it big against another little town to the north called St. Joseph. That's just a fascinating little part of history. The when it's the only city in the world that, well, I shouldn't say the only city in the world, but it is a city in the world that is recognized by a very large religion as being this gateway to heaven and as this Mecca. And that history of it is fascinating. The history of the Kansas City Mafia is fascinating while also being very dark. And if I think about like so many horror books or vampire books, particularly, like, people love to write about New Orleans. People love to write about St. Louis. And don't get me wrong, I love both of those cities. But the city, the history of this city is dark, which really also brings up one of the things we're working on. I do have to do a plug here. Can I, VampireKitten?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So you talked about our pop-ups, right? And they're not our pop-ups, they're my friends' pop-ups, and I manage one of them. And that one is particularly usually horror theme focused. So we did Rocky Horror. That's a combination of Edward Schmaltz and Nick Pageant. They worked together on Gaslight. Uh, uh, and they did Rocky Horror. We did Krampus. You'll see my big Krampus statue
Oh,
right there behind me,
I love me some
standing there.
Krampus events.
Yeah. And now we're doing Evil Dead. And the place we're doing it at Ninth and State is just like this fascinating part of Ninth and State has a very sordid history. Like um, Tom
That's
Pendergast lived there in that building when he came in. Your South Cal native probably have a lot of listeners everywhere, but Tom Pendergast was a huge gangster and democratic uh, party guru god, and they called Truman Pendergast senator, and then becoming president. Um, and He lived there when he came into Kansas City, and when he sold the building and then supported the kind of like through this corruption the rebuild of the building. um, and when they did, they found 7 human bodies in the basement.
wow.
Or they pulled out 7 human bodies, and we are working our pop-up in this basement, which I have had haunted experiences in this basement, and it's all Evil Dead focused. So I highly encourage, if you're in the Kansas City area, come out and experience this really crazy old speakeasy. Ran as a speakeasy through the 1920s. and we're trying to keep that speakeasy haunted feel to it. So
So let me kind of touch on that too. You've got your Evil Dead pop up, but the Evil Dead the musical is also coming into town. So if people wanted to do the double feature of that, that would be really cool. That
mhm,
brewery that or the building that he's talking about is I've been there.
mhm.
Excuse me. It is so cool. It is so cool. It is like a really interesting piece of history that I actually should look more into just because I thought it was so interesting. But yeah, if you are, how long does the Evil Dead pop up run?
Oh my. So it starts on June the 9th, and I think it runs 5 or 6 weeks. I hate to sit there and say I don't have the actual end date on it because I'm not even thinking about the ending. I'm working on more of the build out of it right after this interview. So, you kind of think about the beginning, you don't think about the ending
Right.
until the ending has to wind down. Right.
I will make sure that at the end of the podcast we'll get all of the links for everything that we've
Oh
discussed
yeah.
into the descriptions so people
Yeah.
can find everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And Nick Pageant always does. He's doing the partner on the bar, but he's also the producer of and the director of all those shows. And the Evil Dead musical. We have tickets this Friday night, so tomorrow. Yeah.
I know I have to go check that out. I still haven't seen it, so I would like to see it here where it's local, and that'd be really cool. So, is it the same company that's doing it across the country, or is it a completely different production company?
It's completely different. This is a local production company that's Nick Pageant. He runs Pageant Productions. He does Rocky Horror every year. It's a great time in Kansas City. He just did The Craft as like the first place out of Vegas that did the Craft musical. He's doing Evil Dead. I can't all remember. He just ran Steel Magnolias, so it was Craft Steel Magnolias. Like
That's really
he
cool.
just going right. And just because he's just going, that doesn't mean there's not places for other people to do theater. But uh, uh, he's got it going. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's great. Yeah, I'll definitely have to go check that out. Yeah, the shows here in Kansas City are incredible. I just saw Whiskey Dynamite, and it's possibly the best show I've ever seen in my life. It was incredible. It was a neo fantasy western, like spaghetti western aerial show, and it was. I have seen Cirque du Soleil. I've seen some really wild stuff. Best chef's kiss. It was so good. It was
Yeah.
amazing. So I'm
I
glad that
haven't
we
seen.
have anything quixotic. Go see it. It's worth it.
And they tour all over, so
Mm-hmm.
they are definitely another gem of Kansas City that goes all over, and that's fantastic.
So speaking of Kansas City history, what's some of your favorite weird Kansas City history? Like, what is your weird love about the city? Like, is it do you have like a ghost story? Do you have like
Um,
unusual sightings, UFOs? Like, what is your
yeah,
favorite Kansas City history?
like
Or
all the facts of all Kansas City is like it is important to recognize that this area's really history goes back to like the 1840s, and we gloss over all of this, like we don't think about it, but Kansas and Missouri started fighting the Civil War 10 years before the Civil War, which is why you had Bleeding Kansas. And you can see this history probably in the most detail by going to Lawrence, which was a implant city in that area, where they in the process of John Brown and his fight for freedom of African Americans and freedom from slavery, uh, and the people within Lawrence being very sympathetic to that, they came in and they murdered every single person in Lawrence, and you can see that in the old graveyard where like every male and a lot of women they murdered in, I think it was 1850. I want to say 1853. I have to look at the date, but that's just there, and then you have this growth period in there, um, and that really is kind of that whole building up of that. One of the weirdest facts I know is that at one point in history, the most wealthiest concentration of wealth in the world was in St. Joseph, Missouri. And St. Joseph, Missouri was the undeclared capital of the Confederacy after the Civil War, where after the Civil War, the Missouri did not sign the Declaration of Surrender. and a large number of landowners sold all their property and they started banking in St. Joe, which is why you had all these particularly Southern soldiers robbing all these banks because it was aristocrats who had turned their back on them. And when originally the amount of concentration of wealth in St. Joseph was there, the railroad, they wanted the railroad to not go through Kansas City. They wanted it to go through St. Joseph, Missouri, um, because of all the wealth that the federal regulators could kind of pull from these aristocrats. And they refused, and they met the federal regulators with a large militia. And they said, fine, we'll go through Kansas City. And they went through Kansas City. And at that point, they were almost like equal in size. And that led to a huge, obviously they had already left a large number of African Americans had already fled and kind of moved into Kansas City. That just further solidified it. And that St. Louis to Kansas City Railroad really helped establish our blues and jazz. So
which is
that's
amazing to
like the
hear.
weirdest history of
Hmm.
how our states have been shaped by violence and oppression, and then fighting against oppression, and where Kansas City has kind of always stood on that map. Um, and then, and in the same way that Kansas and, Kansas City, Missouri kind of stand on that map today. Yeah.
It's definitely a melting pot here, and I think that's pretty rad because you can say that America is a melting pot, but when you really look at it, there are a lot of different kinds of people here, and it's more prevalent that of I guess the melting pot being more equal on every side here. It
Mhm.
seems like there's a little bit of everybody represented, and I think that's super cool.
Mhm. Yeah, it
So
really is. Yeah, so that's just the things that I find to be kind of fascinating about this. And I know we have a lot of work left to do as we come back into Pride Month and as we come back into, all the different things happening, not just the fight against weirdness, but kind of like the fight against, bodily autonomy and the fight against people letting people be people. I think that, the every city and every major urban area needs to let people have that space to express themselves. So that's me. Sorry to get political on your show,
no, 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 you're fine.
DK.
It I I am of the thought process that as long as nobody's hurting them, well, I guess other people, whatever they
Mm-hmm.
want to do to themselves is whatever. But as long
Mm-hmm.
as nobody's hurting anybody else, then I don't have a problem with pretty much anything that anybody wants to do. Like, or as long as it's consensual,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like, it's not my choice to make choices for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I am and where I stand on that line, because I just think that people should be able to live their lives in peace and whatever they want to do. If I want to be a vampire on the internet, I'm going to do that, and if like if they want to identify as something else, they could do that. That's not hurting me. you know,
Right. No.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so that's my thought process on the whole thing. I think it's important that people have their own autonomy and do what they want because it's their lives. So let's talk about one of your favorite things right now. What are you into right now?
Oh, well, so my other job is artificial intelligence, right? So I
Mm.
work in AI ethics for the largest employer of the world, right?
Okay.
Um, so we work on some pretty fascinating issues and work with some pretty fascinating people talking about AI ethics. So the majority of my day is probably spent in that, right? My working day is in AI ethics and trying to connect people in that area and trying to give voices in that area to write better agreements and to really make sure that the AI that we're developing is, meeting our ethical standards, right?
Right.
As a country and as a people that we want. And, I've been doing that now for a while, as far as programmatically and building these programs and now on the ethics side. So it's been fascinating to see how this is now taking place in a much more public context. There's been public criticism of this, but with the new AI programs, whether that's GPT, whether that's like Mid Journey, whether it's the new art programs, but all these generative AI programs, you've really seen a transformation, and you have these easier user interfaces now to interface with it and to generate content. And now we're seeing the fight about that play out in, um, on the writer's strike, and Hollywood is the big one, or it can play out on the internet where people are using, or critiquing the use of AI. Um, and that's there's a part of me that's kind of like John McClane, right? And Die Hard, like welcome to the party, pal. Because there's some major things that I've looked, had in my thought processes going through this, and the book that really led me to push from where I was doing cybersecurity and different types of things with the government on that area and with industry and into this area was a book called Homo Deus, right? And it was a book that could be very transhumanistic in a way of like, hey, we're about ready to really approach an awesome level of humanity, both with biotechnology and artificial intelligence primarily. And Yuval, who wrote the book's critique on that, was that we're about ready to have a major some major social problems. And I have my own beliefs on how to kind of deal with those things, but that's the majority of my day. So I wish it was all hanging out and just making me see better, but I, I there's a part of me which that likes to do a little fight the killer robots. Yeah.
So, so for our listeners, there's a couple of things I want to ask you
Yeah,
going into this.
there's a lot there. I'm sorry if that
Yeah,
was
no, no,
too
no.
much.
Yeah, I'm trying to like kind of bring it down a little bit to make it a little easier to swallow, like chew on. So, AI at its core is
Mhm.
what? Just basic understanding of like if you were to explain to somebody in like a paragraph what AI is, how would you explain it?
Okay, so what we had with AI, so I can't just do that in like a paragraph. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
It was
If
a
I were to do
challenge.
it in
I'm
a
sorry.
paragraph, it's the same as like Kansas City, right? Like,
Right.
how did we get here from there, right? Um, so, we had different rules-based coding, and we had different ways of doing what we would call supervised, where a person would check, this is a cat, this is a cat, this is a dog, this is a dog, and you do data labeling. And you start to build the computer to start thinking. And then you had unsupervised learning where after it had enough training data, it had enough instances of cat and dog in person, you would start dumping more data at it and asking it to do things. And we started to have a lot of problems with that, right? Like I can give you examples after examples of, if you ask it to find trains, it doesn't find trains, it finds train stops, right? And you just, machines weren't perfect. And they're not perfect now. But what we saw was for relatively a small amount of money, um, you could take a huge amount of data. And instead of using that unsupervised learning, you could try to do what's called a cognitive neural network of design, which allowed it to explore and build these connections. And it took a
Okay.
huge amount of data with GPT-2 and then GPT-3. Now we're into 3.5 and coming out into version 4. It's more data and then also more intersections of that data. So it's starting to resemble like a human mind. Um, and as you dump all that data in there, you can then ask it questions. And it has a lot more free ranging capability to do things like write computer code, write books. Um, it's writing novellas for me, right?
Right.
Uh, in some senses, it's better than some of the shows I watch on television because I hate some of the writers on some of the shows. But we start to see this doing things that before it was much more of like you thought about it as like an automation. So what is AI? If you ask that, it is really getting data to run through different processes in a similar manner to a neural network to generate and create new output. So it's in a lot of ways like what we do as people. Um, so that's why we would call it artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, it is code and it is data and it is, redesigning some of that from the ground up. Um, but that is the basis of it.
It's really cool. So, what are some, I guess, my other question is, what are some misconceptions about AI that people think they know about but aren't true? Like,
I think, go ahead.
is AI just copying off of like artists, or is it copying off of like anything and just taking that and just remixing it? I guess that's a big misconception, like, about AI art. So, like, are there a lot of like major misconceptions about AI that people don't quite understand, and then they just assume that, oh well, it's just ripping off artists?
Well, in a way, they are ripping off artists, right?
Right.
Like,
Well, it's data, it's information.
right. Um, so when we look at certain algorithms, we can look at the point and say these algorithms had a huge amount of training data put in by select artists,
Right.
and those artists did not have say in that, right? Um, and once that training algorithm is established, even if I overlay more data onto that, I'm not able to disentangle the data,
Right.
right? So at some point, in the same way that an AI is now seeing images, it has already been trained on a specific set of data, and that has higher what we call weights and measures to it than normal data. So in the same way that I would go to an art gallery and I'd start seeing artists, or if I went to art school and I would start training on different styles, there would be styles that I would pick and say, these really appeal to me, or I'm able to replicate
It's the same
closer to these
thing.
styles. What?
Right. I said it's
Yeah.
practically the same thing that an artist would do on its own. So, artificial
Yeah.
artist.
Well, there is the weird thing in this is the fact that if I adjust the weights and measures, I can change the artist much quicker than I can change a human artist.
Right.
And I can say, hey, I really want you to be Van Gogh, or hey, I really want you to be Michelangelo, or I really want you to be super realistic or neo-realistic. And you can see that when you interact with these programs.
Right.
And for artists, that that that's terrifying. And the meme that's out there, right? Like I had no desire to live in a society where I slaved all day for 7.25 an hour, 7.50 an hour, and robots made poetry and art. That's not the future any of us wanted. Um, it is definitely the attack. So big misconceptions that I don't like about AI, and they've been around. Like I almost feel like it's like propaganda. Like AI can't draw hands. Like
Right.
you're running old stuff, man. AI really can't produce good art, um, and music and poetry. And there have been repetitive studies that show that it can. They just haven't ever gotten to the point of really, um, and artists have been showing that in their art for years, right? Like
Right.
they've tried to raise this warning bell. It's really now that it's so easy to interact with and so readily available that we start to really worry about it.
Right.
If you produce something, right, or if you sell something on Etsy, or if you are creating something, it is hard to maintain intellectual property over that, and it's very hard to maintain separation from the artificial, this massive number of algorithms, particularly when you are interacting with those algorithms through Etsy, through Facebook, through
Right.
Instagram, that these algorithms are already touching and affecting your business. If you try to use sponsored content or you're trying to put ads out there, that's already a well pushed field on
Mm-hmm.
it. Um,
It's been around for a
and
long time prior to all the Midjourney and everything. I just don't think that people understand the application that it was in effect before now, because it's now more visible.
mhm. and
So,
and 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 it's definitely more visible and it's much more powerful. There's that scientific law of like Moore's law, which people can fight about it and do all that, but like where it is today, where it's going to be tomorrow is in a way, I'm not trying to scare a vampire, but in a way it is existentially terrifying. And, you know, as a society, we're not going we're going to have to work super duper hard to put what we would call guardrails in the place on the left and the right of where we want it to be. And
right,
I support the writers' strike, but I also do understand that the writers have been profiting through AI, through Netflix, and from those things for a long time.
right.
So I don't know how to break it.
Well, uh, to kind of to bring up the mood here a little bit. Did you see that TikTok video? Let's bring the
Of
mood up.
course, let's bring up the
Did you see
mood.
that?
Happy Pride Month, everyone! Get
Happy
out
Pride
there
Month.
and a happy Pride
Um,
Month. June 10th, we all need to march in Kansas City, and
oh
I would
yeah,
love to see a whole lot of goths and
that'd be
marching. I'll be
awesome.
marching in June 10th.
Okay, two things. First of all, the speaking of Pride Month, did you know the Babadook was an unintentional Pride icon?
No, I did not.
Okay, so Netflix miscategorized the Babadook during Pride Month into gay films, and now the Babadook is a gay icon unintentionally. So I hope to see some Babadooks out there. There always will be, but you should go look up Pride icon Babadook and see some of the amazing art that people have created. So good.
I
Um,
will.
and then two, did you see the video of the robot that was put to work doing a menial task and then offed itself because it was pointless? Did you see that
Yeah,
one?
no. There's been like the robot security guard
Mm-hmm.
who drowns himself immediately, and then the menial robot who did that. And yeah, no, and the very touching art piece, right, of the robot who was just constantly trying to keep
Oh,
its
bringing the
hydraulic
oil
fluid
back,
in
or
and
yeah.
trying to bring that fluid back into it to keep it going. And there's no doubt that you can. I guess, yeah. So yeah. So bringing up the mood, yeah. Robot suicide, robot demise. Way to do that. I'm sorry. I'm just a bowl full of laughter, right?
It's
Yeah.
okay. I mean, that's why this show exists, right? So we can talk about
Yeah.
these really interesting topics in I mean, life is full of light and darkness, and I feel like both things should be discussed at some point. You know?
Right. No, I think that, whether it's history, whether it's robots, whatever it is that the way my mind works is that we have to constantly rebel against apathy, right? Like
Right.
we have to recognize that's why I love watching horror films, right? Like I can watch a horror film and it doesn't, it can stay with me, but it does make me think of like, hey, I should have a good experience, right? And if you watch a horror movie and it makes you super depressed, that may not be the right movie, right? Because we do have to have that reaction to tragedy, you know. Yeah.
So
So,
let's keep bringing the mood back up. I just let's just go off the rails a little bit. I recently came back from a regional Burning Man group or event called Interviews. Have you been to Interviews?
I have not been to interviews.
Um,
I
it's
wanted to go for like 2 years, and every time I just can't get it, can't
it's
get it
such a
right.
weird weekend. I ended up going this year. I've been wanting to go to a regional for a really long time. I've been going to Burning Man since 2012, like Big
Uh-huh.
Burn. So I've been to at least 7 times. I don't know,
Uh-huh.
since 2012. So this was
Wow.
my first like little guy. And I think what's really interesting about interviews is that there are people that have gone to interviews for years, like since its origin, and have never been to Big Burn.
Mm-hmm.
But what's super cool, since we were talking about culture earlier, what is super cool is that they have a handle on Burning Man culture. Like, they know exactly what it is. I mean, there are a couple of differences. Like, instead of the Billion Bunny March, it's like the cow party or whatever. I don't know. It's really cute. But like, there are certain things that also Interviews is really spoiled in, that they have running water and showers, which is wild to me. I'm so used to being in the desert with like no running water. So like, it's very cool. We met a lot of really great people, and a lot of people from Interviews are out of Kansas City. So I'm really surprised that the groups like Freaks and Geeks and the Burners haven't really cross-sected yet, it seems like. Or I feel like the people that I met at Interviews just haven't really come into the Kansas City groups yet, and I almost want to be like, hey, join these groups. So I'm probably gonna go on Interviews and be like, look, there were a lot of you from Kansas City, we need to all come together and do cool things together, you know?
Yeah. Well, we should, right? And we do. The Rabbit Tribe.
There are a couple.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like it needs to be more. They need to be brought together a little bit more, because I feel like they're just a little disconnected.
Yeah. So there is, right? You know, that is definitely a thing. It's also a thing about like passion, right? Is that I all my friends who go to Interviews and are deeply ingrained in that community are some of the most amazing people, and they are constantly on that edge of creativity and on that edge of happiness and peace, right? And so they're doing great, amazing things. And because they have a community, it is kind of our job. It's my job to go to them.
Right,
Right.
that's true.
And that's important for on our recognition. It's not important for burners to come to Kansas City and do that. It's really important for Kansas Cityans to go and know they can go to Interviews.
That is true.
One of the people I would follow the Rabbit Tribe. I would do in Kansas City. That's the tribe that I have my most amount of my friends in. Um, and know people at like the regional nights when they do have regional nights here in Kansas City, and go to those events, meet people. But it is intimidating, right? Like, it's probably not intimidating for you who's gone to so many Burning Men, but it is definitely an intimidating experience, I think, for a lot of people.
So for my listeners that don't know what Burn is, because a lot of people don't really know or understand what it is a art community. They don't like to be called a festival, because it's not really a festival. It's not really a rave. It's not really a massive. It's not really any of those things. It's a community of people who have a specific set of principles that they follow at the burn and in life. So there's 10 principles plus one for some people, which is consent. And the 10 principles have changed my life in a way and made me a better person. Because when I started going to the burn, I didn't know who I was. When I started going to the burn, I realized there is so much more to me and so much more that I can give to other people that also benefits myself. So that's kind of why I'm like I'm like the hippie vampire. I'm like, peace and love, man. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important that people give back to their community. They, participate in their community, and that's just separate from the burn, So, I mean, I'll post the principles in the description because I think it's really interesting. It's a great set of guidelines for life, just in general. And these really amazing people get together and they do art in random places, and then they burn it all down, and it's just a really cool community of people just doing what they love to do. And everybody's so different, and I think that's what I love about it. Like, everybody's from every walk of life, that they all have different jobs. I've met nurses, I've met firefighters, I've met professional artists, I've met film, television people, radio people, I've met people who take care of the elderly, like just people who have just a bunch of kids that they bring to the burn. It's for everyone. And I think that it's important that people kind of at least go once in their life to sort of experience what it's like to be part of a bigger thing than yourself. So,
Yeah. No, I definitely should, right? I definitely should do that. It is,
do it.
I will sit
Well,
there and say everyone has talked about it. I've read the principles. I've compared the principles on Kansas City Freaks and Geeks because I absolutely do love them. Um, the principles and then, just the ethics of that. Um, so, and everyone who's associated with it are some of the most fantastic people I know. So,
so there's
I
a
the intimidation factor, right? But at the same point, I you gotta get over it sometimes, and sometimes you gotta jump in the pool,
go
right?
with friends and volunteer immediately. If you volunteer immediately, people will guide you to sort of where you need to be. It's and everyone's so helpful. Like if you're lost or you don't know what to do or you want to help, just ask. You know, somebody will be like, "Yeah, let's do it." I think I didn't volunteer at interviews because I didn't know what to expect. The nature out here is a lot harder for me than the desert because I'm a desert person. Like I'm fine with the desert and that sort of heat and that sort of environment, but out here, like I'm not great with bugs and ticks and poison ivy and that sort of stuff. So it's really
Well,
hard for
well,
me.
last year it was flooded, right?
Yeah, I heard
I'm
that.
sure you heard about that and how
I heard
bad
about
that
winter
was.
fuse when it snowed one year. So the
Yeah.
Midwestern weather is just something that I haven't quite figured out yet. However, I will say if you miss interviews, there are plenty of other regionals in the area that are very cool. There is a new one starting up in Wichita called Aorta.
Uh-huh.
They are brand new this year. There is Gateway, which is I think this weekend in St. Louis or right outside of St. Louis. There's River Fire, which is a float trip for burners, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
or like it's on a river. And there's a couple of others. There's like one in Ohio. They're all relatively close. So there's tons and tons of stuff. There's a Midwest Burners website that has all of the
Yeah.
tickets and stuff on there too. So
It,
there's a ton of regionals out here, and it's crazy to me that there are so many.
yeah.
It's
It
super
really, it
cool.
really is. It is a fascinating look at kind of being bored in the Midwest, right? You kind of got to do some crazier regional stuff, right? So it is awesome, and you
I
convinced me. Another person who's convinced me to go. I think I need the pep talk more
we're gonna have
like
to
in the
start it. We're just gonna
February
have to
March
start a Freaks
timeframe.
and Geeks camp. That's all.
Well, we can work on that. We can work on that. We can work on that Vampire Kit, and we can definitely talk
Right?
about that right
For
there. Yeah,
sure. So,
yeah.
another event that's coming up that I'm actually kind of excited about is Embrace. Um, it sounds so cool. I think you have more details than I do about that. Can you explain a little bit about what that's going to be?
I sure hope I have more details because I helped write the rule book for it.
Oh,
So if you have more details on that, then
I don't.
if you have more details on that than me, then we've got a little issue on that. Yeah. So
Okay.
I have a little actually I have a little flyer right here. You can't see it on the thing, but it's June 17th. It's in the West Bottoms, so it's just coming up in a couple weeks. It's in the West Bottoms. You can get tickets at Vampire. I think everyone on this podcast knows how to spell it. KansasCity.com. Um, and what it is that we really wanted. We've done LARPing, live action role playing, and vampires like since the '90s, and um, that community's kind of gotten really not as fun, right, as the burner community, and not quite as festive. But we really want to try to make a fun, festive experience, and we really want people to have the ability to interact with that world and with these concepts in a very non
Traditional.
uh, uh, intimidating way,
Oh,
right?
non-intimidating.
Yeah, because if I bring out like the books of vampire, right? Like, and we just start throwing books on books, people are like, no, this is way too much. Um, and we want to give people the ability to have a very specific time-based event. So you show up at orientation, you can make your character there. Rules are explainable in about 3 to 5 minutes. They're very easy to understand rules. And then you get in your costume, and from the start of the event, throughout the event, you are playing your character. And there's different characters. You can be a vampire, right? There are some differences in the vampires through the World of Darkness. We've kept them very basic and very generalized. So if you're an old person who has all these different theories on it, we do kind of boil it down. Um, and You can play a human. You can play a servant of a vampire. You can play a blood doll of a vampire, which is a person that the vampires feed off of, or you can just be a regular party goer. You can just get a ticket and just show up. But while you're showing up at a party, there's a vampire party going on. So they're going to, feed on you.
That's so
And
cool. That's
you
so
talked about
fun.
you talked about consent. We're working with some great consent specialists in this too, and we've really built consent into these Nordic LARP rules in a way that, and that's a Nordic LARP. It's not a LARP like, um, if I were to play a game, right? Like even Dungeons and Dragons, I might be playing to win, and I might be playing to win against my other people. Like I want that magic item. And in Vampire LARPs, you're always trying to beat everybody else. But this one is you're actually kind of playing to lose. So when you make your character, instead of having like, I want to be the prince of the city, you can kind of go into it and say, how am I going to die? And if you think about it on that way, you can make a lot better story for everyone else involved.
That's going to be
Yeah,
really
so
fun.
it'll be a great event. Like I said, get tickets.
So
Kansas City Freaks and Geeks. Go ahead.
it's not just the party, or it's not just the LARP part, because the LARP part is one part of it, but I also heard that there's like an after party afterwards.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
After the event, we're gonna take off like our characters. The event is over. The vampire party's over, and then we've got another 2 hour long party afterwards where we can dance and get to know each other a lot better and really let our things out, so to speak.
So fun. I'm
Yeah.
like so excited. It's going to be really great. But yeah, so I'm super excited. So this is going back to it. This is a combination of what, two different things? It's White Wolf's Vampire the Masquerade, and you said Nordic?
So Nordic LARP is the way that you play a LARP, right?
Okay.
So, there's different ways to do this. Now we're getting into super huge geek stuff, but I love super huge geek stuff.
That's
So
fine.
bear with me. Like, you can play a LARP where you're playing a character in a much more combative way. Some of the LARPs people play like have foam sticks, right? And you're trying to like hit each other. Um, and you can play through those. This LARP is built for storytelling, like this style of LARP, Nordic LARP, which started in Norway and has been going on for, pretty much right after like SCA and Renfest started in America. They
Right.
started Nordic LARPs where you were trying to work with people much more like an improv theater to try to tell a good story and trying to tell a really compelling story and give people a really immersive experience. So that's the style of LARP, but we're putting that LARP, and I should sit there and say we are putting that LARP in there with Mind's Eye Theater, in their organization. They, with the White Wolf subcomponents of that to put this Nordic LARP on. So it's going to be a fun, fantastic experience. And if you walk in and you've never played again, like just to have the ability to say, "Hey, I went to a party playing as a vampire." Even if you die, you can, come back or you can play a different character. But the event is time blocked, and then at the end of it, you can all share stories about how you died, or you can share stories about, how awesome Interfuse was, because there will be some of them out there. Yeah.
So what? Okay, I'm excited. Let's talk a little bit about Vampire the Masquerade.
Okay.
Um, so did you hear? I'm gonna touch on a couple of things that I'm a
Okay.
little disappointed in to start with.
Okay.
Bloodhunt just decided. You know what Bloodhunt is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. They just decided to discontinue updates, like development for
Oh.
Bloodhunt, because it just isn't doing well, I guess.
Mhm.
They're planning on rearranging the entire store and all this other stuff, but they're not really planning on putting more into it, which is super disappointing because I think that had they listened to their fan base, they would have gotten a little bit more love on it, because they
Mm-hmm.
sort of alienated a lot of people by doing things that weren't actually wanted and not doing the things that actually were wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing that is upsetting to me is that not Blood Hunt, Bloodlines 2.
Bloodlines too,
Where
yeah.
is it?
I mean, that entire, it was one of the greatest games, I think,
I still play
as far
Bloodlines
as
on
the
my
story.
stream.
Yeah, and it's a great game. That entire development has been riddled with so many different issues and problems,
I'm just
and
so.
yeah, but like there's like a big thing there, right? Like for me, like my vampires in my mind, or the ones I want to play, are always a lot weaker than these super god level powered,
Right.
vampires. And additionally to that, the amount of power in that really comes into, like, Blood Hunt was good because it was all vampire kind of on vampire, but like I never, like the feeding aspect of it, Bloodlines was so much more personal. I I kind of, in a way, I don't know how you make those kind of games. Like, I know there are horror games out there that are very predatory, but like there's something that, our vampires at one point went sparkly, and we're coming out of the sparkly vampires. Sorry if there are if you're a sparkly vampire, that's
No.
completely
No.
fine. But at one point, our vampires went a little sparkly, and what they are now is not, as you see with all the remakes of Interview with a Vampire, as you see them in the Netflix series, as you see them in the Chapel Way, like as you see these types of vampires coming out, we don't have. We've got so many different types of vampires that uh, I don't know if the White Wolf vampires, Bloodlines 2 vampires, with the clans and all that, can have a good game again. And
It's
that's just really
so.
where,
It's such a
yeah.
political thing, whereas Anne Rice is more of an emotional thing.
Mhm.
So I guess it kind of. And going back to Twilight, because we're going to talk
Mhm.
about Twilight, I want to throw, like, I haven't even talked to anybody about this yet. I want a Twilight party, just like a super cheesy Twilight party in Kansas City. Just
Well,
everybody shows up and we're all just covered in glitter and it's ridiculous and there's memes everywhere. It needs to be just the dumbest thing ever, but I think it would be so fun.
the people. Like, first off,
I know. I
you
need to
want a
actually
Twilight party.
talk.
You want a Twilight party. I always say, be the party you want to be,
I know.
right? So
I know.
so
I just
roll your Twilight party. I'll be happy to help promote it. I'll be happy to support it.
I
But
think it's
if
going
you're
to
if
be
you're
so
looking for other
dumb.
people, you know the people to talk to,
I
right?
know.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
dumb, but I think it would be so fun.
It is the cult nature of that, was for a long time, was just like the way people got into it. Now the cult nature of that is the mocking of how deeply they got into it, or
Right.
how deeply other people got into it. I hate to mock other people's, like, I hate to yuck other people's yums, even if it's Twilight, but at the same point, every experience of true, like, getting into something has a huge element, or everything, like, the harder you get into something, I think the cringe increases a little bit more.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Twilight was a gateway drug for so many people to vampires and werewolves for like teenagers. They
I
you
know,
know.
I know, and they're as people come into the new vampires, and as people come into, seeing those remakes, I hope we can do something more than sparkly vampires, but I don't know exactly what that is. I know the big one right now is fairies, right? Like, and I get that because they're so much more fun than vampires. But I know we don't have a fairy kitten; we have a vampire kitten. So in the vampire fairy war, I side with the vampires, but it is a good one. Yeah.
Right now, you're getting into True Blood territory.
Yep.
It's all
Right.
been done.
Yeah, and then we can talk about that series. But all of these things we can talk about on another episode, Vampire
I
Kitten.
know, we gotta
Maybe
go.
then I'll be all
Look at you.
vampired up. Maybe we'll do a live cast from the Embrace or something
Oh
like
my
that.
god, that
But
would be so fun.
yeah,
All right.
it would. All
Well,
right.
thank you, James, for joining me on the Coffin Lounge. Is there anything else that you would like to plug? Like, where can people find you?
Well, the next place you're gonna probably find me is 9th at Evil Dead pop-up bars when we open, and
Okay.
then the 10th right there I will be at Pride, marching with the Satanic Temple. Right. So hope to see you guys out at all these events and all this funness that's happening, and then the 17th playing a vampire in the Embrace.
And then we'll go ahead and link to the Kansas City Freaks and Geeks on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you so much for being here with me today. This was a great conversation. We'll definitely have you back another time. So it was a pleasure talking to you. For sure. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right. See you on the next one.